Hello and welcome to 10-Minute Elections. Today is Thursday, July 9th, 2020. As instead of our usual Thursday grab bag episode, I'm doing a continuation video of Monday's Senate map overview video. That's just always a two-part series because of the sheer volume of races. Today, we are going to continue where we left off in Iowa and Minnesota and head down to Alabama. I'm just going to hop straight into the video and classify Alabama as a lean Republican. Doug Jones is still above water here and approved of incumbent, or at least more approved of than disapproved of, although neither his approval rating nor his disapproval rating tops 45%. If a Democrat's going to win in Alabama in a Senate race, it's probably Doug Jones, although he probably hasn't done enough to distance himself from his party. He has voted the Democratic Party line on a lot of key votes, and that should make him a prime target for someone like, presumably, Tommy Tuberville, the expected to win the GOP primary, to be able to paint him and tie him to Chuck Schumer, that type of Democrat. So, again, a lean Republican in Alabama. I don't think this one is going to eclipse 5%, which would make it unlikely, although it could. But for now, because it's an incumbent that's really not all that unpopular like Cory Gardner is in Colorado, I'm leaving Alabama as a lean Republican. And now moving over to the two races in Georgia. The regular Senate race, that one's pretty easy to classify. Going to go ahead and leave that one as a lean Republican, although this one should vote to the left of Alabama. The special election, I've been looking at all sorts of polls and whatnot, everything I can get my hands on, and I really have no idea what's going on here. This special election is looking weirder and weirder by the day. I still think Doug Collins is going to end up winning here, defeating Kelly Loeffler for the GOP spot in the runoff, which is presumably what's going to happen. Again, in this election, we'll have four candidates vying for spots in a runoff on election day. Those four candidates being Republican Representative Doug Collins, incumbent Republican Senator and Brian Kemp appointee Kelly Loeffler, and on the Democratic side, Pastor Raphael Warnock and Matt Lieberman. So ultimately, I'm going to classify this one as a lean Republican, but this could go any which way. All I can say is that I don't think Kelly Loeffler makes top two. I think it's going to be Doug Collins, and it could genuinely be either Warnock or Lieberman. But I think we'll get some more clarity on that closer to Election Day, not actually after Election Day when it's down to two candidates, presumably Doug Collins and a Democrat. I would be very surprised if the top two were to actually be Doug Collins and Kelly Loeffler, in which Doug Collins, I think, would win. Moving up to South Carolina, this is a likely state on the presidential level, but Jamie Harrison's actually been very competitive in polls here. I wouldn't really take that one at face value, though. I think Lindsey Graham will win, and he'll win by not as much as Donald Trump will in the state, but I think we can expect maybe an 8 or 9 point margin for Lindsey Graham in the state. Moving up into Kentucky, Amy McGrath just recently won her primary by about 2 points over Charles Booker. It was very close, and obviously with the ongoing pandemic situation, votes were still being counted, a week after the election, and the race wasn't called for quite some time as the national political spotlight had already shifted. So ultimately, very early on in the cycle, I actually considered Kentucky to be quite competitive, but as we got further in, as even Amy McGrath started to really have a primary fight, but even before that, the polls finally started getting down to earth. It seemed that ultimately Kentucky's Kentucky, and it's a red state, and it's the leader's seat regardless of how unpopular the leader is. I don't think Mitch McConnell is going to win by 15 points here, but even though I'm going to classify the seat as a likely Republican, this one's going to be troublesome for Republicans because if they have to start allocating resources to defending Mitch McConnell in Kentucky, and heck, let's say Chris Kobach does win his primary in Kansas, we discussed that one last time, But if they have to start throwing money into Kentucky and into Kansas and maybe even into South Carolina, Texas, or Alaska, they're not going to have the funds they need to win in states that Democrats are expected to be genuinely competitive in, like North Carolina, like Maine, like Iowa, like Montana. So moving on from Kentucky, that's a likely Republican. I think we can expect to see about an 11 or 12-point margin. Moving on to the state of North Carolina. Last time I classified this one as a tilt Democratic. Thom Tillis is quite unpopular here, and I think if the election were held today, Cal Cunningham would win by right around that 1% threshold. Banking on, though, that the current situation won't be exactly what we see going into election day, I'm going to go ahead and leave this one as a tilt Democratic. I've discussed North Carolina on multiple occasions, but essentially, Cal Cunningham is going to lead in most polls. Cal Cunningham is going to do well enough in the suburbs such that if he can really boost turnout in some of the more urban parts of the state, he should have the sheer number of votes he needs to win by about a point. Moving up now to the state of Michigan, battleground at the presidential level, and we have incumbent Democratic Senator Gary Peters, who lost on re-election in 2014, going up against Republican Black businessman John James. John James is a rising star in the Republican Party. He is scheduled to give the keynote speech at this year's RNC, actually. However, this is something I talked about with Martha McSally in Arizona, and it's something I'm going to bring up again with John James in Michigan. The voters of Michigan already rejected John James resoundingly by double digits in 2018. Debbie Stabenow was up on the ballot as the then incumbent Democratic senator in 2018. She won an 11-point victory over what was considered to be one of the strongest GOP candidates nationwide. So, seeing as that happened, and Gary Peters' disapproval numbers are fairly similar to Debbie Stabenow's, I think this race will be much closer than Debbie Stabenow's blowout win, but I don't think it will be anything less than a lean Democratic. All right, 2 more states to cover, as right now I have the Democrats at 48 seats and the Republicans at 48 seats, although you can pretty quickly make that Democratic one 49. This has been often rated as safe. I don't think it will eclipse that 15% threshold necessary. Republicans really haven't been able to field a strong candidate in the state of New Hampshire, and Jeanne Shaheen is a quite popular Democratic incumbent, so I see no reason that this race would be competitive. I think, although I have it classified as likely, we could easily see a 13, 14, 15-point margin in the state. One more race to cover now, and that is the state of Maine. Susan Collins and Sarah Gideon, and this is also a race that I have talked about a lot. Sarah Gideon has been leading by increasing margins in recent times. She has towed the party line on some key votes, just like I talked about with Doug Jones in Alabama. And actually, there's a pretty large similarity. They're both very bipartisan senators, although maybe Susan Collins known a little bit more for that. But Doug Jones representing a very red state in Alabama, it's a safe Republican state at the presidential level, and Susan Collins representing a likely blue state at the presidential level. She was able to win a landslide victory in 2014, was the most popular senator in the U.S., but has plummeted, is now the least popular senator in the U.S. That's how senators like that often work. And in fact, just because of the national political landscape and the fact that Sarah Gideon has been leading by larger and larger margins, I'm actually going to move this one from a tilt Democratic over to a lean. And I feel pretty comfortable doing this. The threshold for tilt to lean is 1.0 points. And I believe that at this point, Sarah Gideon should win by more than that. I think we're looking at maybe a 2.5 point victory as of right now moving forward. So here is my map as of Thursday, July 9th. It gives the Democrats 50 seats and the Republicans 48, meaning Democrats need to win one of the 2 toss-up seats plus all the seats I marked as blue, or the vice presidency to win back the Senate for the first time since they lost it to Mitch McConnell in the 2014 midterm elections.